My name's Colbey. I'm a physiotherapist. I work for NeuroMoves. I've been a physiotherapist for about 13 years now. I specialise in neurological rehabilitation and falls prevention as well, but specifically in aged care. I'm really interested in this falls prevention scene at the moment. I think it's something that we kind of neglect a little bit, and especially in the older population. I find the older population and the neurological population, there's quite an intersect in those two populations. So it's kind of nice to work with them together, and I think a lot of the training strategies are going to be really similar.
Fall prevention is more than balance. What does that mean, Colbey?
Yeah, look, I know whenever I'm doing a class, people are like, oh, it's a balance class. We're going to do a balance class. We've got to work on my balance. I like to think a bit broader than balance. Falls prevention is what we're thinking about. Balance is just one component of falls prevention, because that's kind of the end goal that we're aiming for. We're trying to make sure we're not going to have a fall. And how do we do that? We need to focus on the balance, but we also need to think of the other things that are coming in, playing a part in that sort of situation. So you've also got your strength, you've also got your postural stability, and you've also got some different risk management things that you can externally that you can try and reduce the risk. So there's a lot more than just balance.
Let's go through it. So talk to me about strength.
Strength is an interesting one. So I think there's two different forms of strength that we're focusing on. The first is, what lower limb muscle groups do you have available in terms of strength? What sort of groupings do you have? Generally, we would say in an older population, you need those big muscle groups in your legs to really minimize that risk of having a fall. So your bottom muscles and the muscles at the front of your thighs, your quads. Those are the two main ones, the two strongest muscles on the skeleton that are really going to try and help reduce the risk of falls. If you do not have those available to you, you're a permanent wheelchair user, then you have to start to think, what are my other strategies then that I need to keep strong? So now we're talking about, we need to get your posture muscles, your shoulder blades, really strong at trying to help prevent that fall and keeping me in a good, advantageous position.
Okay, let's talk more about postural stability.
I think postural stability, I always like to, once again, I like to simplify things a little bit. It makes it easier to visualize. You've got to think of your base of support. So you really want to think, I need to keep all of my weight within my base of support. So there's two different things here. You're kind of thinking of, I need to make sure whatever posture muscles I have available to me are going to keep me as upright as possible. You're going to keep a tall tower standing a lot easier than a tower that's leaning or it's really struggling to keep that stable position in the middle. So really thinking, I need to get my muscles really apt at holding me in that stable position. The other thing is, I need to make sure that I'm not getting myself into a different position, so that upside down triangle position. So think about if someone's trying to reach too far away and their feet are in a bad position, you're starting to throw your center of gravity right outside your base of support, which is your foot position. Or same sort of thing with if you're in a wheelchair. If you're in your wheelchair and you're having to try and really reach out to do something, you're throwing your balance right off because you're moving that center of gravity. So you're really thinking, how do I make sure my muscles are going to stabilize me and get me back so I'm not going to have that risk of falling? So keep that stability in mind.
Let's talk about balance, the most complex component.
Yeah, look, I think balance is kind of the main area of falls prevention. This is what most people will notice. They'll just say, I'm having an issue with my balance. That is a very broad thing. Balance is a very specific sense. It's actually not one thing. You think you've got your vision, your hearing, really simple. You kind of got the main organs that are controlling both of those. Now we think of balance. This is actually an amalgamation of multiple things coming together, working together to keep us upright. Once again, I like to think of it as, what are the main systems? It's probably not everything, but the three main systems are your vision. It's amazing how much feedback your vision is going to give you to try and just make sure you keep your balance. You'll notice it pretty quickly. If you start to try and move around in the dark, if you're going to the toilet of a night time, there's no lights on, you're going to notice you're a lot more wobbly without that vision helping you out. So it's really important to think vision. Once again, there's not heaps we can do to change this system, but what we want to do is we can refer you on to someone. If you wear glasses, have them checked pretty regularly, annually I would say. If you're Getting towards the older age, cataract surgery is really, really important. It reduces the risk of falls by a huge percentage, somewhere about 40%. As soon as you've had bilateral cataract surgery, if that was a problem for you, your fall risk is reduced by 40% instantly, and very rarely do we have such a huge impact so quickly. The next system is your vestibular system. So this is a bit more of a complicated system. Basically, in your inner ear, you have 3 little canals in 3 different directions. You've got fluid in the canal, you've got hairs that move with the fluid. So when you put your head in a certain position, what you'll notice is you can know that your head is tilted, and you know exactly what angle that's tilted at because your inner ear system has told you this. This system, the way that I like to think of it, if you get motion sickness or if you've ever had vertigo, this is an issue with that inner ear system. Motion sickness, what's happening is your vestibular system can feel that movement, they can feel that acceleration, deceleration, they can feel that boat rocking, but your eyes are actually giving you the feedback saying you're not moving at all. So then your brain goes, uh-oh, we've got a mismatch in signals. I'm going to make you feel sick to try and get you out of that situation. So that's an issue with your vestibular system, not understanding the change that's going on with the other systems. So really important to think, once again, there's not heaps we can do to change this system, but if there is an issue with your balance, could it be coming from here? There are places we can refer on to. Usually it's an ear, nose, throat specialist. They're the ones that will specialise in this. But nowadays you have lots of physios and allied health members that will specialise in this specific system to do all different tests to make sure it's functioning well. The last system is your muscular system, and this is the one that you can change the most. So you might have heard people throw out that word proprioception, rolls off the tongue.
I have never heard that, Colby.
Good. Well, let me tell you about proprioception. It's kind of when we say balance or I've got issues with my balance, proprioception is usually what they're talking about. This is basically, think of your muscles and your tendons. Every time they change their position and stretch a little bit, they're giving you that feedback of how much stretch they're in, so it can also tell you exactly what position you're in. We can improve that sense with training, and this is something that we're trying to focus on. This is when someone says, I'm doing a balance training, this is usually what they're focusing on, improving their proprioception. And this is something that we can improve throughout our life, always able to improve it.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about technique, and I feel like, is this fall technique? Because we, in the last episode, very briefly mentioned there's got to be a correct way to kind of like fall out of your wheelchair. But I mean, I know that we're talking about different sort of strategies and stuff, but like if you're a quad falling out of a wheelchair versus a para falling out of a wheelchair, that's going to be very different strategies to take on because your falls are going to look very different.
Yeah, definitely. And look, I think you're exactly 100% right. The strategies are very individualized. Even in 2 people that may seem exactly the same, they might have slightly different body shapes. Even without a neurological condition, people are going to fall differently. People are going to get up from the ground differently. They have different strength levels in different muscles, things their body can do, things they can't. Maybe they could kneel. Maybe they've had a knee replacement. Maybe they can't kneel. So there's always different strategies. I say in terms of your falls strategy and your falls prevention strategies, you kind of need to train them individually. There are some specific strategies that you would think about as well, though. If you're falling from a wheelchair, there's not too much you can do. You kind of need your arms to protect your head. Number one thing is protect your head. You just need to make sure your muscles are going to be more capable of absorbing that impact with proper strengthening. So once again, it's your shoulder blade strengthening, and it's your making sure your arm muscles are nice and balanced on the front and the back to try and absorb that impact. And that's the sort of strategies that you would want to work on. When we're talking about other technique, it's more about the technique to try and keep your balance. So if you're able to stand and you're thinking, all right, if I start to throw myself off balance, first thing that comes in is your ankles. So your ankles will wobble around. I've talked to podiatrists before. They reckon about 80% of your falls prevention happens at the ankles early on. So it's really, really important to get that strategy working well. You'll probably notice if you are standing and balancing as well, and you're able to do that, you'll feel that your arches start to ache. You'll feel that your toes are clawing on. That's your ankle strategy, saving your balance very, very early on. After that, you jump into something called a hip strategy. So if you throw yourself off balance a little bit more, you'll notice your hips start to jink out a little bit. And this is, like we were talking about with that tall tower and that triangle shape, this is your easiest way to get your weight back inside your base of support. So getting your hips to throw yourself back in there. After that, we do something called a step strategy, and this one is really, really important. If you're able to stand, move around, it's making sure that you move your feet if you're going to fall. I always say if you're going to fall like a tree from a nice tall position, you're going to land really hard and you're going to hit the worst things that you could hit, which is either your hips, your head, or you're going to land on your arm and impact your shoulders. If you can start to step or move your legs a little bit, you're going to land on maybe your bum, maybe your knee. They're going to handle that impact a lot better.
And so what is dual tasking?
Dual tasking is an interesting one. This is another one that we've kind of coined in the rehab world a bit more. What I like to think of it is being able to multitask. It's kind of your multitask. And this is a really tricky one. And you'll notice this with your balance. As soon as you're talking to someone about, how did you have your last fall? Describe to me your last fall. They're usually doing 6 or 7 things at once. So they're out shopping, they're on an incline, they're looking for something, or they're in the car park trying to find their car. There's so many things going on at once that what happens is their balance gets thrown down the pecking order, or there's just too much mental sharing of all these things that are going on for their balance to get the appropriate attention that they need. So what happens is you start to sacrifice that balance. The best thing to do is to train your balance to be good at being distracted. So I always think there's 2 different ways of distracting you. Do a balance task while your brain is distracted. I've got a few ones that I like to throw on people. If they're mathsy, I'll go count backwards from 100 by 3s, or if I'm feeling mean, count backwards from 100 by 7s, and do that balance task. You'll notice that as your brain is starting to try and figure out this impossible mathematic equation, your balance is working twice as hard, and it's really tough. Because basically you've started to take that attention away from your balance, put it on this different task. The more you practice things like this, the easier it's going to be to make your balance more automatic in the background.
Okay, because semi-related, and I don't know if I'm going to include this in the podcast or not, but like my mum, she's 83 years old, and she will go from like table to kitchen to other side of the kitchen back to the table, and then that whole rotation she will lose balance and feel sick like immediately. And so what would you do for older people who have because this is not something that she had years and years ago. So what would you do if it's something that's crept on in older age? And I don't know, what sort of tasks would you give them?
Yeah, definitely. Look, they say there's a few things that happen as we age. Basically, from the year about 25 years onwards, you lose 1% of muscle mass every year on average. So you think after you're adding, when you're 83, that's a significant amount of percentages you've now lost in terms of strength level. So often we're going, all right, let's look at what needs to train. So often there are some major muscle groups that need to be stronger. Often when someone does have these balance issues, they've just avoided them. They've gone, all right, this is difficult, I'm going to avoid that. That has a sort of flow-on effect. They've lost that practice. They've lost the ability to do that. We use a nice little slogan in the physio world, use it or lose it. As soon as you start to go, all right, I'm not going to do that task anymore, your brain goes, I can use that space for something else. And it will start to sort of shape that way. So it's really important to go, all right, what specific task are you struggling at, or what's the issue with the balance or feeling that you're not confident in that movement, and start to train those components. Once again, there's usually a bit of strength that's involved, especially with someone as they age, and then there's that balance component as well, because they just haven't practiced the task, they've avoided it, so they don't have that specific balance. I like to say balance is going to be very specific to what you want to improve it at. So if you've got someone, say, standing on one leg, that's amazing. If you can do that, your balance is doing well, but it's only going to be specifically helpful for you when you're standing on one leg. I prefer to get people into functional positions, so think of your step stance, think of you moving around, you're walking, you're turning, stuff that you're doing all the time. Focus on balance training in those positions, and that's where it's going to actually transfer directly to that that task. Same with when you're in your wheelchair. Moving around in your wheelchair, handling, cornering, something you'd know with your dancing skills. Moving around requires a whole new level of balance, especially when you start to put speed into the mix and coordination, something I've never been good at myself. Really important to start to go, all right, we need to get specific.
Why is this especially important for people who have neurological impairments?
Yeah, look, I would say now we're thinking not only as you age are you losing certain capacities, muscles, but thinking of neurological conditions, you also have this other impairment to your strength and to your sensation. So usually you don't have those sensors that are able to give you that feedback. So when you have, say, a spinal cord injury, you no longer have this proprioceptive skill in a certain set of muscles. So you have to start to think, what muscles do you actually have available to you, specifically you as a person, and we need to train for that specifically. So this is no longer a one recipe fits all, do this, do that. It's we need to make it tailored to the exact muscles that you have available to you with your neurological condition, and it's going to be completely individualized. Look, I'm a big fan. If you're doing therapy with someone, you need to get them doing the task, see how they do it, see what works for them, and then try and adapt it within their capacity. So look, get out of your wheelchair, get on the ground. How do you move around? How do you roll? Think of all those different positions and the transitions and what muscles you're using to do them, and then train those strategies specifically to try and help with that balance. Cool.
And do you have any final comments you want to make about what people can do, or anything you want to talk about really with falls?
Yeah, look, I'm a big fan of something that I call incidental exercise. Balance can be a tricky one to train. People quite like doing weights. You feel good, you get those endorphins, you see the benefits. Balance, mostly people are more like, oh, this is a bit boring, or I'm not actually feeling that it's improving my body per se. What you want to do is you want to try and make it part of your daily exercise. So you think of things that you're already doing. Say you're brushing your teeth in your wheelchair. All right, let's try making you get into a trickier position. Take your back off the backrest, try and brush your teeth in that while keeping your stability. Simple things that you're already doing, because what you're doing there is you're having your mind distracted with the task of brushing your teeth, and now if we throw an additional balance task into it, you were already going to spend that time doing that task. Now we throw balance into it, you've got 2 minutes of extra balance morning and night if you're following your dental hygiene routine. You got that extra 2 minutes morning and night that you've just focused on your balance and improved it every day. Doesn't seem like a lot, but when you throw that into every single day for a matter of 4 weeks, the amount of repetition that you're getting is significant, and you can do that for a few different tasks you're already doing. You're training your ability to dual task, multitask, and you're training your ability to try and figure out what your body has to do to keep your balance.
Brilliant. All right, thanks very much, Colbey.
Happy to help.